Good evening, the Legacy League. Coming to you live this evening. It's Valerie Ling from my bedroom today because it is my birthday this week, and because I am a firm believer in expressing some ideas for what I might need for my birthday. I've actually requested that my family actually do up the studio because it just wasn't cutting the mustard for me with the visual, and so my office and studio is in lockdown, so I'm needing to come to you live from my bedroom. How are you going? I hope that I might get some of you to hop on and chat with me. Have you seen all the talk about climate change and how students are rising to the occasion to make their statements with strikes and speeches? What a legacy to leave behind, right? And isn't it fascinating and interesting to me how these students have not shied away from conflict? Now, whatever your views are about going on a strike, I think what is interesting is that they've had an encounter and probably a relationship to think about how to express their ideas through very conflictual methods. And today, in fact, I taught a class on managing conflict. It's part of a 6-series course that I run on stress and stress management and resiliency for students who are going to be entering pastoral roles, and I take them through particular frameworks to help them to figure out how to see things that typically they would assume to take a kind of a subservient and even self-sacrificing position on, because we know that these are the most common assumptions and scripts for helpers, people who are in the caring profession and in pastoral settings. One of it is being subservient to their needs, their own subjugating their own needs and sacrificing their own needs for others. And so last week I worked on managing expectations, and this week I worked on managing conflict. And though I have designed this course and though I have taught this course before, it really came alive to me today, and I thought I would share the content with you for food for thought. So we all know that assertiveness is important, and we know it's a skill, and we know that it's something that we want to pass on. So essentially, assertiveness is being able to express your needs while respecting your needs and also respecting the needs and the space of another person, and being able to communicate in a way that's not aggressive or passive. Now, when we put it into a conflict model, the model that I use is the Thomas Kilmann model. One axis is assertiveness and the other axis is cooperativeness. So the degree to which you have high or low degrees of assertiveness and high or low degrees of cooperation from the people around you when you're in conflict. And my main message during this course is that conflict is not bad. Sometimes we assume that conflict is war-like reactions, heightened emotions, catastrophic disasters, broken relationships, and yet conflict does lie on a continuum from mildly disagreeing all the way to violently opposing. And the second thing that I bring out in the situations in the course is that conflict is necessary because it provides us the opportunity to tap into someone else's point of view and to share our point of view, and it can lead to growth. And so the Thomas Kilmann model, which I'll share in the comment, is a YouTube video, is a helpful way to actually neutralize our thoughts about conflict and to be able to see that there are going to be different situations where you possibly will sit in the different conflict squares. Now, some of them you don't want to stay there forever. Some of them you just make do with the situation that you have because you need a temporary solution. And it gave me an opportunity as I was teaching this course to reflect on two areas in my world, family life, particularly with teenagers, and also managing a business when you've got to manage human relations. And I realized that one helpful thing that I could do is to actually be able to, first of all, for myself, to reflect what quadrant in this model do I tend to sit mostly in. So there are 4 quadrants that you can sit in. There is a competing space, an accommodating, a compromising, an accepting, and these other spaces. Watch the video, it's really short. And for me, I sit very comfortably in the competing space, that is high directiveness, low cooperation. And some people can look at that and feel like, hey, that's not a good place to be in. Hey, Tiffany, hello there, how you going? How's the weather over where you are? Just talking about conflict and thinking about teenagers. And so, there are going to be times when you have to sit in that space because that's the space that you occupy when it's dangerous. There's no time for us to think about things, or there are particular principles that you cannot bend, maybe because of the law, for moral reasons, contractual reasons, business reasons, you can't bend. And the same it is when you're dealing with your teenagers, right? You know that there are going to be some areas that you cannot bend. The issue, though, is that the older that they get, the less we can stay in that directive space. We probably need to move into other spaces to get them to also increase in their assertiveness. And of course, the challenge is actually figuring out where the negotiation points are. And so we had a conversation last night in our family, and I realized, and I came home and said to my son today, I've realized that I've been sitting in a particular conflict space that is not appropriate for your age. And so though there are certain rules that cannot be broken, at his age, there are now some things that I need to flex on. I need to bring him into a more collaborative space, he and I, to talk about how he sees things. What sort of moral guidelines is he using? What sorts of values is he using to make these judgments for himself? And today, as I was teaching the class, it was a big light bulb for me that just like that, in a twinkle of an eye, my teenage son was actually moving into a space that I needed to move with him as we were encountering conflict, so that I could help him to manage conflict, but I could also respect him. So that was one. When you watch the video, when I posted it into the comments, you might reflect on your own family life in terms of stage of life, season of life. Do you stay in one square of conflict, or do you move around? And maybe we need to think about some other spaces that we can move around in the conflict wheel. The second reflection I had was in business. And I realized I talk about limited empathy in business. Benny, you have a business. I love it. Up, Benny. I actually downloaded it because I've been wanting to figure out how I can use it. And in business, I talk about how there's always going to be limited empathy, right? It's different maybe from what I mean by limited empathy is that it is unreasonable to expect that everybody is going to see your exact point of view. Now, you can bring them along in the vision, you can bring them along in the journey, but they're never going to fully understand your experience of business and empathize because they're not there, they've not gone through the journey, they've not created it, they've not actually they're not invested in it. So there's limited empathy. And therefore, when you're in a conflict situation, it's probably also likely that they're not going to be able to take on your point of view all the time. Our assumption, though, is sometimes that is entirely possible, I think. And we push ourselves to get to that point where they can see our point of view. And you know why that is? Well, if you actually look at the conflict quadrants, it's because in business, there is one very important quadrant that you can't compromise, which is the directive quadrant. There are going to be times when it's not about consensus, when it's not about collaboration, when it's not about deferring either. So that's I think the accommodating space where you defer to others. You have to lead. You have to be directive. There are some non-negotiables, but the issue is, do our team know what those non-negotiables are? Just like with our family members, do they know what the non-negotiables are? And so, if they know what those non-negotiables are, and are they able to accept your influence? Are they able to accept that those non-negotiables are fixed and necessary because that is an area of conflict where decisiveness and directiveness is needed for the benefit and the well-being of the whole team, even if they don't understand it and even if they don't empathize with it. Have you ever been in a situation, Penny, where you've had conflict in your team and you've had to lead? So for me, that was a really great realization today in building a legacy and leaving it behind. Not everybody is going to be able to see your point of view. They don't have to. We can work, however, on building the relationship so that that influence is received and welcomed by the right people. And sometimes it's not going to be received by all people. All right, I'm going to make sure that I put that link in the comments. See you later, Penny.